Get this started as our participants are joining in. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Lauren Sisler, sports reporter for AL.com and ESPN. I'm also a board member for the Addiction Prevention Coalition and volunteer my time to help out this wonderful organization, the APC, that aims to educate all of us on the dangers of substance abuse while also, providing resources to those who are looking for that and struggling and in need. So our goal today is to really what we want to do is to educate you about substance use disorder, or SUD, as I'll be calling it throughout much of this webinar, and the additional challenges that have become present during the coronavirus pandemic. You know, the Addiction Prevention Coalition has actually been fielding a lot of emergency calls for individuals and loved ones who are looking for recovery resources to get them the critical help they need. And we are here to help connect you with some of those resources here in the area. And so, you know, I'm joined by a tremendous group of panelists to help answer some of those important questions today. And I'll start kind of going down the line here. We have Lesley Plaia, who's the project director, Recovery Resource Center. Lesley, wave to us.
Hi.
We got Lesley on the call. We got Melissa Beck. She's a peer recovery support specialist, UAB Beacon Recovery.
Yeah.
And then we've got Latrice Daly, an Adolescent and Family Services Coordinator, UAB Beacon Recovery. And last but not least, we got Michael Wise, Substance Abuse Counselor, UAB Beacon Recovery. And so certainly a great group of panelists, and I'm going to have them go around and certainly introduce themselves. But before we get started, I want to let everyone know that we would love some of your input and love some of your questions. We want this to be interactive, and so that's why we're here. We're here because of all of you. And so we have over 100 participants today. Whoop, whoop. I'm so proud of everyone for joining on and giving us this opportunity to talk with you and to have some fellowship and obviously answer some all important questions. And so please feel free to submit your questions. There's a Q&A button you'll see at the bottom of the Zoom call. So you can submit your questions there. I will have that panel open. And of course, these questions will remain anonymous. So, you know, if you have questions or whatever, I will not announce who is asking those specific questions, because we want this to be a safe place for everyone to get those questions answered. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful panelists, and I'll start with Lesley Plaia, the project director at Recovery Resource Center. Just give us a little background about who you are, a little introduction, and just about the Recovery Resource Center.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So like Lauren said, I'm Lesley Plaia. I'm the program director of the Recovery Resource Center, which is a program of the Crisis Center. We have been open since May of 2018, and actually May 1st of 2018. So we have an anniversary. And we help connect individuals to appropriate treatment and recovery support services. So what that looks like is that any individual or their family member can call us, and we can connect them with a treatment referral. Everyone's connected with a peer support specialist who is an individual in long-term recovery, and they help walk through that process with the client. Because a lot of times people don't know what to do when they're seeking services. Everything can be quite confusing, especially in the state of Alabama, if you have insurance or if you're underinsured, uninsured, and we want to make sure that we make that process as smooth as possible for individuals who are seeking recovery. We also do outreach at the local hospitals. So we have our peer support specialists who will actually go to the hospital departments, whoever calls us, and provide services there. And sometimes that's just a general conversation with a client. Just talk to them about options, talk to them about recovery. The beauty of peer support specialists and individuals in long-term recovery is they can share what it was like for them and what it's like now, and hopefully inspire the individual to make some different choices. Now, with everything happening with COVID-19, our services have changed, and so we're not doing in-person services anymore, but we are still manning our 24/7 crisis line that's actually managed by the Recovery Resource Center staff. So we're available to answer questions any day, any time of the day, and also able to provide assessments which are needed for the certified treatment centers in the state of Alabama. So that's just a little bit about us. I'm happy that we're doing this today.
Lesley, all great stuff. Of course, we appreciate kind of the rundown there. And our other three panelists join us from UAB Beacon Recovery. And so I'll give the floor to Melissa Beck, first and foremost, peer recovery specialist at UAB Beacon Recovery. So give us a little introduction.
Great, thank you so much. Glad to be here. So I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I serve a couple of different roles at UAB. So I work with the COAP grant, which is the Comprehensive Opioid Addiction Program grant. So I actually spend, when things are normal, I spend a few days during the week working in a courtroom. So if someone has given the option to be diverted into a substance abuse program, that I will meet with that person one-on-one, go through the specifics, go through what their options are, give them my contact information, so really hold their hand in the process. And I'm always quick to identify myself as a person in long-term recovery. I'm coming from a place of empathy. I'm coming from a place of compassion. It is a judgment-free zone. So I'm there to be a resource to them and get them to the place that they want to be. So that's part of what I do. I also do weekend groups. And right now, of course, we're doing telehealth and have the privilege of doing some adolescent groups and some adult groups Monday through Thursday. So that's it.
All great stuff there. All right, Michael, take the floor.
Hey, well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Lauren. So yeah, like Melissa, I'm also a peer recovery support specialist. I currently work as a counselor with an active caseload or with a telehealth caseload for right now. But I've done sort of a little bit of everything at Beacon. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I was a client there about 4 years ago. So it's really gratifying to me to be able to work at the place that I was introduced to recovery. What that looks like now is we're doing obviously telehealth groups and then staying in contact with our clients in every way we can to be there for them during this time.
Awesome, great stuff. And Latrice?
Hey everyone, it is awesome to be here to talk about a subject that we're passionate about, substance use. And I am the Family and Adolescent Coordinator for UAB Beacon. We offer individualized, comprehensive, and trauma-focused service to adolescents from ages 13 to 18. We offer individuals assessments, outpatient treatment, and intensive outpatient treatment. And the family is on our name because we also have a family wellness program that we collaborate with and work directly with to support families that deal with substance use as well.
Awesome. Well, as you guys can see, and as you've heard, we've got a phenomenal panel here to kind of address some of our questions and just overall concerns and what you guys might be feeling. Because I think one of the biggest things we're all learning during this time is that it is a scary time. It is a challenging time, and we're all trying to navigate this and to better understand what exactly is going on and how do we, combat all this through this uncertain time. And so I kind of want to get, just overall takeaways from each of you about the greatest challenges that each of you have embarked on or come across here in recent weeks, especially with the unknown of what's to come. And so I'll just kind of start off the top, Lesley, with you, some of the biggest challenges you're finding and how you're sort of combating some of those.
Sure. Where to start with that? I'm sure everybody else on the panel can agree with me there. I think the biggest issue is that the resources that we have in Alabama are stretched pretty thin to begin with. And now that COVID-19 has happened and appropriately so, treatment centers have put some restrictions or some limitations on how many people they're admitting or how they're receiving admissions or doing telehealth or different things like that. And so I think at times it's been even more difficult to get people into treatment, especially individuals who are uninsured or underinsured, because a lot of times those folks don't have access to telehealth, or if they do, it might be pretty sparse. So I think that's been the biggest challenge. The thing to remember too is, COVID-19 happened, but the addiction epidemic never went away. So we're all still doing this work. We have been. And so, for a while we've been talking about the opioid epidemic. We've been talking about addiction, and it just seems like something else comes up and overshadows it, which is important right now, obviously, to focus on COVID-19, but there are still people who need help. And it's important for individuals to remember that, and remember that just because there is this pandemic going on, it doesn't mean that you need to delay seeking substance use treatment. So.
Yeah, definitely well said, Lesley. And to your point, you know, it is worth noting that, you know, the world, while it feels like it's not revolving around us, that we're sitting in this confined space trying to figure out like what this new normal is going to be, that, you know, the epidemic that we're facing, the pandemic that we're facing does not mute the epidemic that we've and crisis that we're facing in terms of substance abuse disorder. And so, of course, we want to be that beacon of hope, if you will, and that vessel of hope for people to realize that there are resources out there, and that's where our friends here come in. And so, you know, one of you three with Beacon Recovery want to jump in and just talk about some of the challenges and sort of how you're overcoming those with the resources that you have there at your resource center.
Sure. So I think, you know, the challenges are, like Lesley said, there's a ton of them, right? Everyone is sort of learning a new way to operate that no one had any sort of experience with previously, or anything that's like this. So it presents a lot of different challenges. The good news is we have a really good group within the state of Alabama that have done everything they can to adjust on the fly and make sure that we can still deliver these services to anyone that's seeking recovery. It's like Lesley said, it just doesn't, you know, it doesn't end. Recovery or addiction is not, you know, taking a back seat during the COVID-19 time. So, you know, the challenges have certainly been there. Not being able to have that in-person contact is really difficult for, I think, providers to sort of get used to, because, you know, the way that we have been trained to perform our job, so much of that has to do with sort of the in-person component to it. But through things like Zoom and telehealth and things that we're all learning, we're finding that we're making sort of the best of the situation that we have. I guess we're trying to make lemonade out of lemons, right? And provide the services that are still needed for the community.
And I think that's great, because obviously that it's so wonderful for people to hear that and to know that these resources are still out there. And I think that's where, you know, the Addiction Prevention Coalition comes into play, fielding all these calls, you know, sort of the panic and the uncertainty. And, you know, I would want to ask you all, and who can jump in on this, especially during a time of uncertainty. You know, you find that people kind of withdraw. And so we're already being forced in our homes as it is, right? And so we're already being forced to isolate. How do we keep people from isolating even more and seeking the help that they might need to be able to overcome this and hopefully get out on the other end of this, especially when, you know, we're able to hopefully, you know, push past this, but not just for the short term, but for the long term, because we're talking long-term recovery, not just to get through this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren, I'll jump in and answer that one. So as I mentioned before, I'm in long-term recovery. And one of the most amazing things that happened out of this pandemic is there was this very quick jump to technology. So the recovery community absolutely embraced technology. And I'm going to see if I can do this. I'm going to flip screens and just to give folks an idea of what we have available. So yeah, this should work. Okay, so this is Birmingham Recovery Zoom list. So you can see that there's just this, can y'all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
so there's just this amazing amount. This is just locally here in Birmingham, but again, the recovery community just came together and joined, so whether it's their Narcotics Anonymous Fellowship, Cocaine Anonymous, any fellowship, they unified and made these resources available to everyone very quickly. I'm seeing a question pop up and it's asking if they can get a Zoom list for AA. So I'm gonna flip the screen over one time, and just based on the principles of anonymity, I'm not gonna show the actual Facebook page, but I'm gonna flip over to, this is just a simple Word document. Okay, so here is the name of the Facebook page. So I'm happy to email this out to anyone, but the list is constantly being updated. So BHAM, BHAM Recovery Community on Facebook. You have to join that group and ask to join that group, and then you'll have access to all that information. So again, for anonymity, I'm not showing the actual Facebook page. So there is, the other thing that's really neat is you can go to these meetings that are here locally, but you can also go to meetings in Australia or England or.
Wow.
Yeah, I wouldn't go to other places because I don't speak other languages, but yeah, it's been amazing what the recovery community has done to bring people in.
That's wonderful. And we do have a couple people jumping in with their email addresses. And so we can definitely get those emails out to you. Also, if you would like for more information, you can also message us on the APC Facebook page. If you message us there directly, we can direct some of these resources to you and any sort of questions that you may have throughout this process. But we appreciate the inquiries there, and certainly a great resource. And while I've got you here, Melissa, you obviously are somebody that's in recovery. You mentioned that before. What's some advice that you would have for people that are in this isolation, and what are some things that you more specifically have focused on in trying to get through this?
So what's been important for me is to have some type of routine. For me, I like to get up, I like to leave the house and in my protective gear and go get some coffee. My husband's here, he works from home. It gives us a little time to spend together in the morning, but just have that regular routine. So just because you're not going into work every day, or I'm not going to the office every day, I need to have a routine. It's also to continue to reach out to other people on a regular basis. So make sure I'm reaching out, whether it be text, Zoom calls, phone calls, reach out to other people and check on how they're doing. So just keep those connections alive, keep them focused. The other big thing is don't watch the news 24/7. I really try to limit my screen time in front of the television because there's nothing really good that can come out of it if I get obsessive about watching the news. So maybe limit that to 30 minutes. So I'd say keep the schedule, reach out to people, and stay away from the news to a certain extent. That's what seemed to work for me.
That's great advice there. And I want to bring in Latrice here in just a minute, but we have someone that has written in that says they're currently a graduate of the Love Lady Center, and our graduate community has really had a hit as far as relapse is concerned. And so is there any advice that any one of you would be able to provide to make sure people are trying to prevent that relapse? So certainly you kind of touched on it there, Melissa. Anyone else that wants to kind of chime in on that, and what are some tips and tools so that you can really focus on avoiding the relapse?
I think a big thing is to stay connected to people who are working some sort of recovery program, whether it's 12-step based or faith-based or any sort of support. And I was thinking about what was said earlier about, we're all social distancing right now, but I read something a couple weeks ago that said that we need to rename it. We're really just physically distancing. We can still connect to people, and we have to make sure that we're doing that, or because if not, we're likely to relapse or have a recurrence of use or increase depression or anxiety. So making sure that people feel connected. And if they don't know how to, it's calling a place like Beacon or the Recovery Resource Center or the Addiction Prevention Coalition. And for us, it's not just about connecting people to treatment. We want to connect people to the Facebook group or to different meetings and talk to them about the different resources we have in the area. So definitely staying connected to people, I think, is really important.
And I think that brings me to Latrice here. I think one thing that you've noticed, obviously, in talking to a lot of adolescents, that social distancing, as adolescents, we're all used to having that physical connection with people. And, while phones, let's be real, our phones are at the forefront of everything that we do every single day. It's kind of the epicenter. But when suddenly that physical distance is taken away from us, all of a sudden we're we're talking about a different dynamic. So Latrice, you had talked about your adolescents that had been one of the biggest concerns that adolescents have reported, is the ability to stay connected, interact with their peer groups. And so, what are some ways that you all are addressing that with our adolescents and trying to help them to stay connected and not to, suffer from some of that depression that might come with being isolated?
So one of the things that we've done with UAB Adolescent program is keeping them engaged. The biggest thing that we have working for us during this time is that we're able to reach our clients on the platform that they use all the time. So they're connected to their phones, they're connected to the computer. So implementing telehealth services has been easy because this is their tool which they use. Some of the things that we've done to keep them engaged, even here recently, was the implementation of peer services. So we offer 2 peer service groups a week, an AM and a PM group, and our clients engage in peer services, which we have rave reviews on, that they're able to connect to someone that has actually gotten to the point that they are striving to. The other thing is we've done engagement games. So this week we've given away a quarantine and chill package to the client that participates in both their outpatient services as well as their peer group. In our quarantine and chill package, it had all types of fun and games, movie lists, crossword puzzles, a list of actual virtual platforms that they can actually continue to engage on. So Hangout, Zoom, Skype, and different games that they can actually play. So one of the things that parents can actually do is to be aware that, one, adolescents are always connected to each other. And so for them, this has kind of been a shock of life that they've not been able to physically connect. So some of the things that you can actually do is create that experience for them. So it's an app called House Party, and you can create virtual house party where you can invite their peers to join the house party and play games with them through the app. The same with Zoom, but just to be mindful, that even though this time is a time, honestly, I think to connect, that sometimes, like you said, people tend to isolate. So drawing them out, being aware of the signs and symptoms of depression, isolation, loss of interest, and just also to allowing them something in their everyday routine to kind of switch it up, because having a routine is good, but not sometimes for adolescents, they like sporadic. So to just implement something fun that they can do in their daily routine to decompress. One of the biggest things that we just encountered was 420. And so a lot of the things that I've done with my clients to actually prepare them is to talk about anticipated stressors, all right? Things that may come up like 420 to prepare them beforehand of how they're gonna address it. How are you gonna address these high-risk situations? What's something else that you can actually substitute with, right? A sober sobriety party, or another way to actually still have the celebration, still become so social, but do not, break your sobriety.
I love that. Such great advice. And maybe could you give us an example or two? And again, this doesn't apply just for adolescents. Obviously, us as adults. Hey, look, I'm 35 years old, but I'm very much a kid. So all this stuff is great. And I love the house party, the Zoom calls, the Marco Polos, all that stuff. But maybe a couple of examples of things that you have advised people to do in place of, those things, and to have a party or a celebration, if you will, but obviously to be able to maintain that sobriety.
Okay, so one of the things, and this I've heard from my adolescents. So one of the things that my adolescents did were a couple of them in their friend group got online to play Cards of Humanity. So they played that game virtually for an hour and a half. Another one was a parking lot party. The parking lot party consisted of everybody parking in a circle, 6 feet apart, and each person went around and played music, and they sat on their trunks and engaged that way.
Okay, fun.
For our adults are a virtual dinner party or a virtual couples date night. So where you're actually planning a meal, you're cooking it together with a couple virtually, and you guys actually get to sit down on any platform like Zoom or Google or House Party, and you can invite different couples, and you guys are interacting that way.
I love that. That is all such great insight and perspective for all of us to be able to follow, especially as it pertains to not staying isolated in this confine of our homes that we've been confined to for so long. And so I guess kind of going down the list here, kind of getting back to some of the recovery resources and the things that UAB Beacon Recovery provides. Michael, I guess, can you talk about specifically, I guess the resources, let me make sure I got the right question here. I lost my place here. Okay, stand by. Hold on one second.
I know.
Go ahead and jump in. Just take it away. How about that?
So basically, Beacon Recovery is a UAB Medicine affiliated outpatient substance use or substance abuse treatment program for adults and adolescents aged 13 to 18. In addition to group therapy, patients receive individual counseling, connections to community resources, peer recovery support, and family services to help enhance their recovery process. Right now, all of that's still available. It just looks different. It's telehealth, it's telehealth services instead of in-person services. But yeah, so Beacon looks to hopefully customize treatment to meet every individual's needs and their own recovery goals. So what that looks like practically is the initial assessment that Lesley was talking about earlier is free to clients. One thing we're very proud of at Beacon is no one's ever turned away due to the inability to pay. We have groups available on the evenings and weekends. Normally, we do not have weekend groups available right now. We also have free on-site mental health and primary health care. Obviously, those are two things that are sort of on the paused right. So mainly all of our services are still available. They're just, they sort of look different, and what I found is like, there's obviously, it might not be an ideal situation, but there's certainly a silver lining to it also. There's some clients that I have in one of my groups that they live out a little bit, right? They live sort of out of town a bit, and now they're able to join in treatment and not have to worry about that barrier of taking a 45-minute drive to Beacon or to Homewood each day. So there's some things that obviously it's not ideal, but there are some things that are helpful in this time too.
Great stuff. Does anyone want to add to that?
If I could, let me just say this. So as far as admission, I know that certainly with some of our partners in the state that are residential facilities, they've had to put restrictions on admissions, and understandably so. To this point, we have not had to put any restrictions on admissions, and we certainly hope to never have to do that. Obviously, all of our services are based on an outpatient basis. So we have a little bit more, flexibility there, I guess, so to say. One thing that I would like to announce is we've had to change numbers, right? Everyone's sort of working from home, and so things look different. So the number that people in the community would call to start their treatment process at Beacon has changed. And if I could, I'll just go ahead and give it. The new number is 205-580-3278. And that's different from obviously the number that we'll use once we're back in the building.
Okay, read that out for us 2 more times so everybody gets that. And of course, we'll send out this information as well.
The number is 205-580-3278. That's the number to call to set up a time to get an assessment. The assessment is sort of the tool that is used to place people seeking recovery in the most appropriate level of care.
Awesome. That's great stuff. So again, we'll definitely send those.
580-3278.
There we go. I asked and you delivered.
I'm sorry, Lauren. I just wanted to give out the adolescent number as well. The number for our adolescent program has changed as well. That number, if you have an adolescent that is in need of substance use treatment assessment, you can call us at 205-761-0850. Again, the number is going to be 205-761-0850.
Awesome. And again, we'll keep all this information handy. And so maybe just take us through what that process looks like. It is going to look a little different, as you said, but what the process of intake is and how people go about that assessment. So people maybe that have never gone through assessment before and really understand what that process looks like, because I think really the most important thing is that people aren't afraid to go through that process and take that next step to be assessed and determine what the right placement is for them. So if one of you guys wants to jump in and just speak to what that process looks like, and really how simple it is to figure out where their best landing spot would be.
I can talk about that. So what we do at the Recovery Resource Center, we have an intake packet that is completed with a peer and a client. And so that's going to ask a bunch of different demographic information. It's going to ask contact information, a release, and then depending on what the client's looking for in terms of their next steps in their recovery, then we will initiate the assessment. So for folks that maybe have insurance or some sort of financial means and would like to go to treatment out of state, or if they have a specific place in mind, so those are some specific conversations that we'll have. But if not, we can also do the placement assessment, which is based on criteria from the American Society of Addiction Medicine. And all of the state certified treatment centers use this assessment, like Michael was saying, like everyone has said so far, to gain admission to the treatment centers. And what that assessment measures is a level of care. So a level of care is what a client is going to need in terms of their level of treatment. So do they need inpatient or residential? Do they need outpatient? And so what we do at the Resource Center, as well as what they do at Beacon, is we help determine that for the client. So we ask a lot of different questions about someone's history of substance use, if there's medical conditions or complications, any sort of emotional, behavioral, and cognitive issues, readiness to change, relapse potential or recurrence of use, and recovery environment. And so we look at all of those different factors in order to determine the next steps for that individual. And at least for us at the Resource Center, because we are not treatment and we are a referral source, we try to connect those individuals to those appropriate treatment centers. So I might call, and this has actually happened, we'll call Michael and say, hey, I have somebody who I think would be a great fit for Beacon, and we would send their assessment over to the folks at Beacon Recovery or to another treatment center, depending on what that person's level of care is. Now, if somebody does need residential treatment and there is some sort of waiting list, or if there's a delay between when they have their assessment and when their admission date is, our peer support specialists stay connected with them until they actually get into treatment. So we want to make sure that they feel supported as they're waiting, because that can be a really scary and dangerous time. So we want to make sure that everything is set up so that that individual can be successful.
Wonderful. Great explanation of that. And Latrice, I'll get you to jump in on the adolescent side of it. Maybe some advice to parents who might be concerned right now that their teens are struggling with some substance use disorders or substance use in general, and how they can go about reaching out for that kind of help.
So if right now during COVID, I'm sure you possibly found out a lot of things if you are a parent about your child that you did not actually know due to spending time with them. But one of the things that I would empower parents at this time is to, be calm. The first way to connect your child to services is to be calm and to be open, to have the hard conversation, but to gently confront it. And so when I'm saying stay open, you guys know that as adults, the first thing that we hear is substance use. We go all the way to 10, all right? And we want to talk about how we can protect them, what's the dangers. And so to keep that conversation open, the first way to start, the first intervention starts with you. It starts with you staying open. And when I say stay open, I mean open to hear your child's side of substance use, all right? So open means first listening with your ears, all right? Actively listening. If you suspect that your child is using substances, I would not say at the onset of discovering that maybe they're misusing substances that you tackle it right then. I would say, you know, think about personally how you're going to address this situation. Think about how you're going to have to personally swallow all of those things that come up as an adult, as a parent that you just want to badger your child with. How you're going to swallow that. All right. And then plan to have the conversation with your spouse, or I like to use that conversation, have the conversation with the person that's the best support to the child, the person that already has a rapport that's easy, that child would feel easy in talking to, and then empathize. And when I say empathize, I mean you're listening to understand how you're going to connect with the current situation. Because if you're listening otherwise to shut down, to point to judgment, to point to correction, you're going to miss the spot, the sweet spot, I like to call it, and where you can empathize and connect and continue to keep that conversation open. The second thing, and this is a hard one, is to accept. Accept not their substance use, right? I'm not saying that it's right. You have to accept that it's right, or if that is something that they're doing. But one of the things that you have to accept is that it's a coping skill that possibly they've been using, and mostly that it's been working for them. If you can accept this part, this big stage, you get to keep the conversation open to see how it's been working, what feelings they've been using for it. And then secondly, right, empower them. Empower them with the knowledge that you already have to know that this thing is detrimental to your health. This thing could possibly affect your future past this current moment, right? And then you're gonna prompt them, right, with questions, right, to get them to that level of insight that we already have as adults, all right? And secondly, guys, understand that it is perfectly fine for you to have that conversation. I want you to know and be confident that as a parent, the intervention doesn't really start when you get to treatment. It starts with your ability to gently confront and address this situation with your kid. So one of the things that I like to think is that if you can keep this conversation all the way up and open to the point that it's time for you to actually seek out treatment, we're going to get a more open client. We're going to get a more confident client, and we're going to get a family that's already ready to be the best support to that client throughout the process to have successful outcomes in treatment. So,
wow, so well said.
Thank you. I feel so passionate about this because one of the things that, you know, most clinicians will tell you is that if you have a family that's the best support to the client, that really understands substance use, and that is able to kind of swallow all of those things that comes up to protect the client, you will be able to see that it helps with the successful outcomes in treatment. All right, so that means that when you get them to our doors, when you get them out, they'll be ready. They'll be confident that one, that you're gonna stand behind them, but two, that they can work through their issues, all right? And so when they come to us, we allow them the space to talk about their substance use, right? So you'll connect them with a substance use provider like ourselves or someone local that's close to you. But also the second step also possibly is connecting them to a mental health provider. A lot of times underneath substance use, when it's more than recreational, you're gonna see some type of mental health issue going on there. And so the first step is substance use, and keeping it open, guys. Warm them up so when they get to us, it's less opposition, but also too, you have to stay their partner because you're gonna be their partner throughout this process. It's not like you get to drop them off at treatment and we fix them. Actually, it's a collaborative effort between the family and the facility to actually help this kid reach the best outcomes.
Wow, good stuff. That was excellent. I don't know if any of you guys have something to add. Transitioning obviously from the adolescent side of things, but what if we're dealing with just a loved one, you know, a brother, a sister, a mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, whoever it may be? How do you kind of take some of those same tools and apply those? Because what I do find is that sometimes in these situations, the closer you are with someone, sometimes the further they want to push you away. And so how do you address these things, especially as you're coming to learn that there are, you know, substance use disorder issues kind of coming to the surface that maybe you were unaware of before?
I mean, really just everything Latrice just said. I really think that you can
mirror image.
Yeah. I mean, you really can. I think it's important to remember that you have to have the conversation. Mm-hmm. You cannot ignore it or just hope that it goes away, because, and I'm sure everybody else in this panel can attest to this as well, how many calls we've received of saying it was too late. I just didn't have the phone. I just didn't talk to them about this. And somebody dies due to substance use. And so you can't have a conversation with somebody if they're not there to have it. So making sure that you really come at somebody with hope and with care and concern, and making sure that you're not judgmental. And you don't have to have all the answers, but do you know where you can connect someone that can hopefully help you through it? And that's what our organizations do, both the Recovery Resource Center and UAB Beacon, is we want to make sure that people can begin their recovery process and whatever that looks like. So family members, you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to have the conversation and then figure out, okay, what do we do next as a family, as a loved one, as whatever, and realize that you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And one thing I would say, just sort of piggybacking off some of my own lived experience for friends, for family members, even if you take that great advice that Lesley and Latrice just mentioned, and that's exactly really how you want to do it. Go in, maybe it's helpful to sort of understand that you might do it perfect and you might still need to have some thick skin, because it's not always going to be met exactly the way that you want it to be met. But I will say this, although it might be difficult and uncomfortable, the importance of it, we just can't measure. And even, conversations that you have that don't lead to someone immediately beginning their recovery journey, never underestimate the seeds that are planted there. I can specifically remember back to my own sort of early recovery, and even now, right? There were plenty of times where I would have these kind of conversations with friends and family, and looking back on it, I'm sure I didn't react to it in a way that made them feel comfortable. And to be honest, there was a lot of resentment that I had during active addiction for the people that were really looking out for me the most. But I wouldn't be scared away from that, because those same people that were willing to have that uncomfortable conversation with me at that back then, once the wheel really started turning, I can't tell you how much of a motivator it was to not want to prove people wrong, to want to prove those people right, who were willing to have that conversation with me, those people that were willing to have that uncomfortable moment with me, to want to give them something back through my actions.
That's great stuff. And maybe Melissa, you can, expound upon that as well, especially for those that are, like Michael talked about, in recovery or seeking recovery, and obviously kind of going through this process. From their standpoint, what are some tips and tools that you can share that might be able to help generate that conversation for the individual to feel more confident and comfortable in their surroundings, to be able to initiate the help that they need and say, hey, I've got this issue, I want to get it taken care of? Because there's no blueprint for it, right? And things like, Michael said, it's not going to just happen like that. It's not always going to look the way you hope it does. But what are maybe some tools or things that you can share that might help the individual that's actually going through this right now and determining how they're going to take that next step?
That's a great question. And the correct answer to just about everything is it depends. It depends on the landscape and where you're coming from. There's some families where you're not going to have a safe family member to go to, that drinking is, that it is a moral issue, and obviously it's not. But if your family is not your safe place, know that, and know that there are other safe places out there. The Recovery Resource Center is a wonderful place. There is obviously UAB Beacon is a wonderful place to reach out to. If you can go to aa.org, you can go to na.org. There is a ton of safe places that you can go to get the feedback and support that you need. So just knowing that you're not limited to the people in your life that you know. There are people out there, a stranger can be a safer place than a family member perhaps. So I have a friend of mine who lost a pet recently, and he said something, he's like, when you lose a pet, you don't know it until you go through it. And I think substance abuse is like that too. You don't know what addiction is like until you personally go through addiction. And that's not to say we need clinicians. We need people who haven't firsthand experienced substance use disorder. We absolutely 100% need those people. However, there is a different level of hope, strength, and experience that a person in long-term recovery can add. So know those resources to go to. And then the other part of that is, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't feel like you're going to be a burden. And one thing I try to share with people in group, you know, that warm feeling that you get inside you when somebody comes to you and confides in you and asks you for help, you can give that feeling to somebody else too. So you're not going to someone and asking for help can be a selfish act, and it's not always looked at that way. So I think just really knowing the safe spots to go to where you're going to get the help and support that you need is critical.
Great response there. And I guess one question that could possibly come up, especially during a pandemic like this, when there is so much concern about getting the help they need, is it truly safe for someone to get the help that they need now? What precautions are being taken? And, you know, maybe a couple of you guys can chime in on some of those precautions that are being taken and how that's being addressed.
Absolutely. I think it still is a safe time to get help. There's many treatment centers that have implemented policies around COVID-19, whether it is switching from in-person services to using telehealth for residential services. They may space out groups differently, but all of the treatment centers that we work with, I think, and I can speak for both of our agencies, they have some sort of protocols in place to keep their clients and the staff safe, and want to try to minimize exposure to COVID-19 as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Anybody else want to add to that?
It's probably one of the easiest times, I think, if you have barriers to actually receive treatment, to receive great treatment. Telehealth services, one of the things that I've seen is that actually clients that have been on our list that have been unable to get services due to some type of barrier, well, now we just package the perfect deal for them to actually get services within their home without leaving, to engage the family, to engage them in all aspects that possibly otherwise they wouldn't have had it not been for COVID. So it's brought about like some opportunities that some clients wouldn't have, or prospective clients wouldn't have if it wasn't here right now, telehealth, to actually go over those boundaries.
And I think Michael answered this a little bit earlier, as one of our participants wanted to know if telehealth will be something that will be available maybe when the pandemic passes. And I think the answer to that, Michael, is yes. This is something that you could foresee being the case for the foreseeable future. And this might redesign how things are handled. And this might give people more opportunity to utilize these services in a way that provides that virtual help, and obviously maybe provides people with an even safer place to perhaps go and seek out that help that they need.
Yeah, I think so. I think this pandemic is certainly going to make a lot of lasting impressions and probably some changes, not only in the mental health care world, but obviously in regular health care. And so there'll be all kind of changes. One good thing that it's done is it's sort of put everyone on a fast track to learning these different mediums to be able to reach more clients, to be able to deliver services where maybe it would have been difficult to deliver services before. I certainly would imagine that there will still be services that Beacon offers via telehealth. And Lesley, I'm sure you could speak to this. I would imagine the Recovery Resource Center would be doing sort of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, we will be. Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, with 10 minutes left to go on this call before we kind of wrap things up, anybody that has additional questions, please jump in if you have anything else you want to add or ask here in these last 10 minutes. But just kind of going down the list, you know, we are in the midst of this pandemic, and there is a lot of negativity and uncertainty and you know, just not sure what next. But in the same token, I think there's a lot of positive things, and I want to kind of put a bow on this thing by talking about some of the positive things maybe you've seen in your line of work, and things that you've seen as people have come to you to try to get the help that they need, and maybe you know, kind of shed some light on that, and you know, some positivity and hope that might be circulating around. And we'll start with I'll start with Latrice there at the top of my screen.
So some of the things that I've seen is, like, I get to holistically work with the family. I get to learn about family experiences and aspects of my client that I really didn't know, some barriers and some opportunities. And getting back on the family aspect, one of the things that I want to empower all of our listeners listening today is that, kind of what Michael said, you know, we can hand you a formula, but it won't happen that way. And one of the things that can help you power through that is to know that don't speak to the behavior, speak to the need behind the behavior, and you will equally continue to develop those seeds. So one of the things that we know is that change happens in stages. So while you may be speaking to a client in the pre-contemplation stage where they don't know, they're unaware, your seed that you sow to them, whether in great conversation, whether in affirmation, or just extending help to them, is the same seed that they need to get from pre-contemplation to action, to maintenance, to lifelong recovery. And so if you feel yourself personalize it because you have been harping about getting help or constantly offering hand or assistance to a person, see the need, because every time, you know, in substance abuse, if you're looking at the behavior, you will personalize it, you will get burnt out. But if you can see the need behind the behavior that they're displaying, you will constantly want to pour into that. You will constantly want to nourish that to grow.
Great stuff. And Melissa, if you want to add to that and sort of some positive things you've seen.
Yeah, the main positive aspect that I have seen through this, let me back up a second. The biggest barrier to treatment services that I've seen, particularly in a state like Alabama, a city in Birmingham, is we just don't have a great public transportation system. It's just not there. And transportation is a huge barrier to so many people. Transportation, dependable transportation. So all of a sudden, we've taken that barrier out of the equation, and people can log on remotely. They can use their phone, they can use their computer. If they absolutely need to, they can just dial in. So eliminating the transportation barrier has been huge. And I think if we stop and look at it, nobody wanted a pandemic to happen, of course, but this has been a real catalyst for change and ramping up telehealth services, because people have told us they needed this forever, but change is hard. Big institutions don't like to change. So force change upon us, really good things can happen to that. So just having a wider variety of resources, and we've shown that it can work. So I think that that's the best thing I've seen come out of it.
And Michael, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was well said by everyone so far. You know, there's, I sort of mentioned it before, you know, the silver lining is we're able to deliver services. Maybe there is mainly transportation. But then there's also been some things that have surprised me just as on a clinical level. I have noticed that as far as like the groups, you know, certainly right now with everything going on, there's plenty of other things for our clients to have on their mind. And there always is, but even more so right now. One thing I've noticed is that the clients that are internally motivated right now, like Latrice said, what a great time to be in treatment, because it can all be brought there, right there to you. Now, it does take a lot of, I've noticed it, you know, sort of takes a lot of intentionality, you know, to be able to sort of seek exactly what you need. But those services are there, and it's been really refreshing to me to be able to have the interaction with the clients that we have and see the ones that are being very intentional about putting their recovery first and knowing that, you know what, it's still out there for them to go get it if that's what they want to do.
Great stuff there. And I'll wrap up with you, Lesley, here in 1 minute. We had somebody that jumped in and said they host an Al-Anon family group Zoom meeting on Mondays at 5:30. So that information is there with the panelists if you are interested in learning more about that family group session. Also wanted to mention as well, there is a virtual PAL meeting, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, that can also help answer more questions, provide a great support group. So if you are interested in that, that meets on Thursdays. That's going on tonight. So what a great resource. If you want more information on that, please message the APC on Facebook and we'll get you that info as well. Again, that is Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, PAL group. Great stuff. And Lesley, as we kind of wrap this thing up, one thing, first and foremost, I know that we wanted to make sure we get the numbers out there for everyone. The UAB Beacon Recovery number, the Adolescent Assessment number, if you can provide a number for where people can reach you, how they can reach you and get in contact.
Sure. So the Recovery Resource Center number has not changed. The Beacon numbers have, but ours has not. Ours is 205-458-3377. Again, it's 205-458-3377. And that is staffed by the Recovery Resource Center staff 24/7. So we're happy to answer calls at any time. And I wanted to say something, just I think what's been really exceptional about this whole terrible pandemic, like Melissa was saying, nobody wanted this to happen, but it has pushed a lot of our organizations to really push our protocols and make sure that we're offering the best services possible. What's been really encouraging is seeing the clients who have reconnected with us, some folks that maybe we haven't talked to. Oh, sorry. My phone went crazy for a minute. Maybe seeing clients or talking to clients that we haven't spoken to in a number of years. It's been really amazing to see them reconnect. And I just want to remind someone that just because they have a recurrence of use, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't seek help. Just because somebody relapses, it doesn't mean they shouldn't seek help. We're still here for you. We still want to support you. Don't allow that shame to keep you stuck. And that's what we've been telling a lot of our clients, especially as they've reconnected to us. So a lot of hope there. And I'm really excited to see what happens moving forward as all of us are trying to navigate this pandemic together.
Well said, Lesley. We appreciate it. A great way to end this awesome call with all of our participants. Again, each of our panelists, Lesley, great stuff, Michael, Melissa, and Latrice, all here to certainly help, be a great voice for those who are seeking recovery, that vessel of hope. And we just appreciate this opportunity to join all of our participants. And again, for more information, you can go to our Facebook page. Addiction Prevention Coalition has a Facebook page as well as an Instagram account with plenty of educational materials. You'll be able to find a lot of information that we covered today on this Zoom meeting. And then also you can go to our website, apcbham.org. I want to thank you again, all of our panelists, for joining us. Exceptional information. I feel inspired. I feel like, you guys are there waiting for us, open arms, there to help and obviously provide the services that are certainly needed, especially during this time. And so, again, we appreciate it. And also want to just thank all of our participants for joining us today. Wishing you well, sending you lots of love, many blessings. And as Lesley said, let's eliminate the shame, guys. Everyone needs help. Everyone needs direction, especially during a time like this. And so it might just look a little different for everybody, but we encourage you guys to seek help, to talk about it, have a conversation, and hopefully find that help so that you can live, a great quality of life and, get past this as we join arms and join forces. I guess you could say elbows, right? Join elbows as we try to get through this together, 6 feet apart. And again, thank you guys so much for everyone for joining us. We wish you all the best.